Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&A. Last week I did it a day early, or the Thursday morning I think, and this week is Friday afternoon, so I guess 1 week early, 1 week late. But anyway, let's jump right in. Andrew Wolf wanted to follow up on our discussion about the D9H monitors. I guess the D9H1 doesn't have any controls on the front, just the D9H5, so I must not have ever seen the 1 model in person before. I have the 5 right here sitting next to me that I use all the time for testing though. But one last question from Andrew. They wanted to know if I knew anyone with a 4x3 mask for the monitor laying around. And no, they're really hard to come by. I would really like one myself, so if anybody listening has them, could we buy 2 off you? One for me and one for Andrew? Because they're 4x3 CRTs that come usually with a 16:9 mask over them, because at the time these were made, people were usually editing in widescreen and stuff like that. So I had 2 of them. One that was in mint condition, so I just left that as is, and I don't ever really use it, but if I ever needed a 16:9 mask, I could totally throw that on. And then I had another one that was very beat up, so I used a Dremel to cut around the edges and kind of hack myself a 4x3 one. Doesn't look great. You probably noticed it in some of the videos I had, but it's better than nothing. Or just leaving it off looks kind of cool, to be honest with you. But yeah, if anybody knows how to make those, or I guess if there's a way to make a 3D printable one or something, I'm down to buy whatever, because I think I use this monitor so much, it would be nice to have it have a proper look to it. Darkstar7 wanted to know if I'd tried the GBS 8100, which is supposedly a downscaler. They bought one a long time ago, but it didn't turn on, and they're pretty cheap. Wondering if it would be better to pick up the GBS 8200 with custom firmware, or try to give the 8100 another shot. I have no interest in upscaling. So I did, excuse my ignorance, but I didn't know that the 8100 was a thing at all. But I am learning a lot about the 8200. The video should be out in about a week. And I hope to cover all of this, and it's going to be a collaboration. I don't know. I don't want to spoil it. However, I will give the short version of that. It's my personal opinion that Rama did such an amazing job with the custom firmware that even if you're a beginner that stinks at soldering and it would take 2 hours to put this project together, I think it's worth doing, especially for the downscaling, because both 480i and 480p downscaling works. 480i is still kind of very much in beta, so it when I tried it quickly, it worked fine, but I didn't dig into it because I don't ever think it's fair to do a review and dig into like an alpha beta feature type of thing. But I did show its 480p downscaling that looks great. So absolutely would recommend doing that. If I could ever find an 8100, I haven't even looked for one. I just read the question, so I'll try that as well. But I mean, the custom firmware is really good. And if you're used to soldering at all, there's only one tricky point to solder to, and it's really not that bad at all, especially if you have flux and you just use a really thin wire. I don't normally like Kynar wire. I find it's a pain in the butt for so many different things, but there's a few applications where I think it comes in handy, and this is one of them because it's only a single core wire. Put some flux on it, pre-tin your solder, and you should be able to hit that one spot. Other than that, it's about as easy as any mod could get, and you just need some patience setting up the software. The first time I did it, it took like, I don't know, maybe an hour total, because I was just going step by step, making sure I didn't screw anything up. And then the second one I did went really quickly. The only other thing I noticed, which I did a draft of the video, I have to edit it to include this, is that the 8200 is the single output version, and the ones with the yellow buttons are bad, usually have pretty bad output quality, but with the black buttons are good quality. However, the 8220, the dual outputting ones, have much lower quality video, and you can fix this, but that's a little bit more of a complicated mod. You have to solder on 2 SMD resistors. Actually, I think it's a capacitor and a ferrite. I'll show this in the video, but that's just another tip I wanted to throw out there, is if you just want to make it easier on yourself, make sure to get the 8200, not the 8220. So I guess you all could now count this as a sneak peek at the video, but that's coming out. Should be a week, 2 weeks tops, and I really like it. Hopefully people will enjoy the video as well. Rick said they have a monoprice Blackbird 8x1 HDMI switch, which before going into a port, the PS4 goes to a cheap 2x1 switch so they could change whether it goes to a second TV or the Blackbird. Makes sense. However, if I try to change it and put that after the Blackbird so I could send all 8 inputs to the 2x1 switch to choose between 2 TVs, the Blackbird just doesn't read anything at all, and all lights and all inputs turn on. Really doesn't make any sense. This is, one of the many things I've run into with these switches. I think it has to do with the EDID HDMI handshakes, and if it doesn't know what it's plugging into, it doesn't know what signal to send. It really is just a giant pain. You got to just keep trying different equipment. I always reference that Shmups thread that Dirk Swizzler started. Bad Reality also wanted to know, with all of these HDMI switcher questions, am I going to make a splitter switcher video? I would love to do that someday, but there's 2 major things stopping me. I guess 3. One is budget. I would need to buy like 20 switches and splitters and stuff like that to really nail it. And I think that's kind of a waste of money. I'd rather talk to maybe a reseller that stocks these things that I could work with. The other is that I'm so out of time. I have other projects scheduled up for the next at least month straight, and I don't know if anybody noticed, but I've been doing 3 consistent videos a week for over 3 months now, and I just missed last Mondays because 2 different things were stuck in shipping. One stuck in customs, and one just took forever to get here. So, but I mean, I'm still constantly working on stuff, and I would have to find a lot of time to do it. And lastly, I think there might be other people out there that I would either like to work with, or they would just straight up do a better job than me because of the equipment and their experience. So, I'll speak to them. Maybe I'll work on a collaboration video with them. Maybe we could do something like each of us take a couple of switches and test them and just go back and forth, and as long as we're doing the same tests, it'd be cool. But I would love to do that, and I would love to be able to help you, Rick, but I just without the exact same equipment and without really digging in to figure out these problems, I don't know if I'd be able to. To be honest, I would rather work with somebody to make a gaming related HDMI switch so we don't have to mess around with this stuff. And I have spoke to a few people that were a little leery about crossing over and doing HDMI stuff with all the politics that goes with with selling HDMI stuff, but I'll keep poking. Maybe we'll be able to get a gaming switch one of these days. Focus didn't have a question, just a funny, jokey statement, but I still wanted to respond. They mentioned they're a noob and they're still kind of new to this, and they said, sorry for being dumb on this. Don't ever apologize, and don't ever hesitate to ask noob questions. I used to say there's no such thing as dumb questions until I started reading YouTube comments. The only dumb statements and dumb questions are like, did you have it backwards? You're lying about the lag. You're just lying about lag to sell your scalers. I don't sell scalers. So other than complete and total stupidity that is beyond obvious, there is no such thing as a bad question. So don't anybody ever be embarrassed. Ask anything. That's what these Q&As are here for. And don't forget, there's a lot of other people that are on all levels of the retro gaming spectrum that are listening to this. So other people that are kind of new, either new to retro gaming or just new to that one subject you're talking about, might have really appreciated that question. So I don't ever want anybody to feel like, feel silly for asking a newbie question. They're welcomed, and I'm very happy to answer them. Bad Reality had a question that I would have answered differently last week than I would now because of something I've just reviewed. The question is related to the last week's question of, can you mod a CRT by going directly to the neck board? And the question this week is, if I used something that alters and unifies the sync output, like a G-SCART switch, would I have to worry about the picture decentering issues? In other words, I can plug in as many RGBS 240p 480i devices as I can, and every picture would be centered. So, doesn't really work that way. It would still be off because of the way the image is drawn. I never really explained this right, but the best way I could explain it is with my old MAME-based arcade machine. So if I just plugged in the Mortal Kombat board it was a Mortal Kombat stand-up arcade, the CRT was lined up, everything was perfect, and then if I ran MAME with the, I forgot what it was called, but it runs everything in its native resolution and refresh rate, and all the time some things would be too wide, cut off, not wide enough, stuff like that. So you would always run into those problems. However, I'm testing a switch, and the video should be out on Monday, should be out to supporters probably in a day or two, that has H and V controls. So you might be able to use one of those to get 10 inputs, and then you'd have one output. And that one output, you could, in the video, I mentioned that these extra controls are expert only and not just for people who are normally used to just plugging stuff in. However, this is one of those scenarios where you flip on the sync stripper, which outputs TTL level sync, which I'm pretty sure in most cases is what you would want to send to the neck board. It also has RGB gain controls, so you could raise the brightness of it. Once again, you don't want either of those things in SCART equipment. The voltage is way too high on the sync side, and on the RGB gain side, it should be fine, but you don't want to mess with voltages. However, going directly into a neck board, you might need to, and it also has horizontal and vertical centering controls. So while it won't be able to squish or stretch, it will be able to move things around in case stuff is shifted. So if you're really dead set on doing one of these mods, I would actually wire that switch directly into it. So check out the video tomorrow or the next day. I try to always get the videos out early to supporters. Yeah, I guess that would be the best answer for it. But do just keep in mind that going directly to the neck board is way more complicated than doing the OSD mod, and you're probably going to run into stuff that I can't even remember at the moment. I still think it's awesome. I'm not telling you not to do it. Just it's going to be hard. And of course, I always have to say this. Anytime you work on a CRT, the chance of death from electrocution is not zero, but it's not a lot either. So it's one of those things where be very careful. You don't want to shock yourself, especially if it's not discharged properly. Bad Reality also chimed in with a suggestion about the time sleuth question from last week. Couldn't somebody reverse the way the time sleuth is held and point it directly at the incoming image, not the reflective screen? Like literally put it on the projector's lens, or, I guess if you're standing next to your screen, place it over wherever the white bar is and flip it around. That's an excellent question. Anybody with a projector want to test it out? I have a beat up one that's in storage somewhere, but I'm not going to be able to access that for a while. So if anybody has access to one, please let me know. I think it'd be interesting to hear the answer to that. Firebrand X wants to know what the best settings for capturing video in OBS for the DataPath E1S video card is. The settings he tries seem to horribly compress color resolution, especially reds, and the frame rate is choppy. Any tips? So I have some tips, but I'm also still a little bit unaware of how exactly OBS does a lot of different things. So the few things that I'm definitely comfortable saying is use a lossless capture method. I have one linked on the capture page that somebody put together for me that I did post with permission from the OBS team. That's just it's an offline version of it that's configured to use the UT video codec, and that's what I use, and I seem to have pretty good luck with that. You could also check out EpostVox. Just did a video this week about how to get lossless captures from OBS. That was cool. I didn't know that there was a plugin you could use. I thought that was pretty neat. And in fact, I plan on trying that kind of soon. As far as the frame rate goes, I don't know if OBS could support a variable frame rate. I'm pretty sure it does not at all. So if you have a game that's at 60.1 or something like that, you might get weird screen tearing now and then. The R3 wiki might have some more insight into that. I did actually ask the OBS team if they would ever consider having just a standalone, like export the part of OBS that's only a video recorder and add features like that. And they said they're just way too busy right now, which is totally understandable. And the other settings are when you add the source. So there's two ways that I use OBS to capture the Vision E1S. One of them is by capturing the Vision window, which many times that's actually a great way to do it. Same thing with VCS, which is a similar, it's a different way to access the Vision window. I have great luck with that. I've heard some people say that they sometimes have issues with that. And I never have to worry about color compression on that one because it's just a window capture. But when you access the capture card directly, you have those different settings in the drop-down menu when you're first adding the capture card. And a lot of those I'm a little bit confused at sometimes as well. And I'm never 100% sure what is the best one to use in each scenario. So that's something I would definitely go through. Go to the R3 wiki and check out what settings they have. I'm lucky that I was able to always use that pre-configured OBS that I have linked to in the video capture section. But that's a good question, and I would really like to dig deeper. But I think the much more important solution is to be able to have an OBS-like program, or maybe just figure out a way to do it with OBS that replaces Amarek. Because Amarek was able to do variable refresh rates, as far as I know, and you could just simply choose whatever codec you wanted to do the compression. But it's the worst piece of software I've ever used in my life. It never works the same way twice. Everything about it drives me crazy. Sometimes it inverts the image. Sometimes it just won't record sound. So yeah, we need like a modern version of Amarek that actually works. So anybody out there smart enough to make one, please consider it, or consider forking OBS. Or there's people on the R3 Wiki Discord that were talking about making a new piece of software, but I don't think that had gotten much farther. So anything we could do to get a recording software that works like OBS, but it's really meant for classic analog game capture, game and computer, of course. So hopefully something like that would come out soon. And if anybody knows of something, please let us all know. Raymond De Verde wanted to follow up on the question of using RF. By the way, I hope I'm saying your name right. Apologies if I'm not. Everybody knows I'm really bad at pronunciations. But the question is, they connected their Atari 2600 via RF on a VCR like they mentioned last time, and they want to connect more consoles or home computers with an RF antenna, but can't find an RF switch box or splitter. So there's a few different solutions to this. If you're using ones from Sega or Nintendo, they have RF out and then the RF in on the bottom. And I remember as a kid daisy chaining a couple of those. I guess it probably would lower signal quality if you daisy chained a bunch together. But I think as long as you don't try to power on all the consoles at once, it's certainly a solution. If not, Bad Reality recommended a coax splitter like this, and just use the outs as ins and the in as out. I think that'd work. Bad Reality also mentioned use 75 ohm terminators on anything that you're not using. I'm pretty sure that would work as well, but I've always just daisy chained a bunch together and it seemed to work. Of course you're going to lower quality, but if you're already using RF, then, quality isn't your focus today. So, maybe that's going to be a good enough solution, but I think either would probably work okay. Bradley is planning on restoring their Sega Genesis Model 1 and Sega CD Model 2. They already have the cap kits on the way from Console 5, which would be straightforward to replace, but I do have some questions. Well, before your questions, let me tell you how I broke my Mega CD2. I used a desoldering gun, and I thought I was doing everything fine. I would kind of heat up the pin with the desoldering gun, and I would use the gun to bend the cap pin so that I can get a better shot at it. And a couple times the gun slipped and, scraped across the motherboard, but lightly, not hard at all. And it turns out I scraped a bunch of traces when I did that. So be very, very careful. You might want to, if you have a pin from one of the capacitors that's bent, you might want to heat it up with just a regular soldering gun and use like an X-Acto knife or something to bend it up carefully. Or maybe not an X-Acto knife because, anything sharp is probably going to be worse. Maybe one of those plastic tools like I got for opening up electronics devices. I have these weird plastic tools or something, so I don't know how well that would work with heat next to a soldering gun, but definitely learned from my mistakes on that one. Jose had to fix that for me. But getting to your questions, the Sega CD originally had a rechargeable battery in it. Since this battery would be impossible to find, I plan on using a battery holder and a rechargeable 2032. However, the only one they could find is 3.6 volts. Would this be safe to use in the Sega CD? So I think Console 5 has Sega CD battery replacements. I don't know if that's too far off spec to cause an issue, but I would check Console 5 and see if they have a Sega CD replacement battery. I vaguely remember buying a couple myself, and I think there's also a few other mods you could do to replace it with a different type of battery, but that is exactly spec'd to the original. So I would just look into that one a little more, but start with Console 5. Another question, in your Super Nintendo restoration post on the website, you replaced the voltage regulator and added thermal paste. Is there any benefit to doing this in the Genesis or Sega CD? So this is something I talked to Voltar a lot about. And he is of the mindset of just leave it alone. It probably doesn't need to be replaced. I'm of the mindset of, it's 30 years old and it's going to die at some point. So it's my personal opinion that consoles that I have a lot of experience with, like the Super Nintendo, that get an extra benefit from using the newer voltage regulator. I'm definitely going to do it. The white line issue is helped with the 78SO5. And also, I've tried replacing them on the Genesis, knowing that it has noisy power lines, the Genesis 1 at least. And I don't think it really did anything. I still did the same thing. I still replaced them with a 78SO5. I added thermal paste. And I don't really know if it did anything. So for Genesis, yeah, I mean, if you feel like it, Genesis does get hot. It uses 2 regulators. So maybe using, putting newer ones in and adding the paste, even if it gets you 2 degrees difference. Yeah, probably. Sega CD, I'd probably just leave well enough alone for that. Recapping, it's probably going to be, it's probably going to do most of what you would need anyway. So, but if anybody has any other thoughts on that, definitely chime in. I am just kind of echoing my own thoughts and Voltar's thoughts, and that's just general. I don't remember if I've ever specifically asked Voltar, would you do it on a Sega CD? It's just a general, like, hey, would you do this on a normal basis? 3, I plan to replace the power supplies with a single triad power supply. According to the ratings on the original, a 2.5 amp power supply would cover both consoles. However, is there any benefit to using a 3.5 amp? Also, is there anything that I need to know before purchasing the power splitter adapter, or will any adapter that fits be fine? 2 excellent questions. I have a very strong opinion on this. It is just an opinion. When it comes to amps and power supplies in the context that you're talking about, if your console requires 2 amps and you use a 3 amp power supply or a 10 amp power supply or a million amp power supply, you're not sending more amps into the console. Your power supply is just able to provide it should it be necessary. So it's my opinion that I would always use the higher one, especially with the triads, because you could use those on a bunch of different consoles if you wanted to. So yeah, I'd spend a few extra dollars and get the 3.5 amp, knowing that I might never need it, and I might have just wasted $4 or something, but it's just my opinion on that. I would always have extra ground to be covered, because you could always add a 32X in as well. Anything you need to know before purchasing the splitter adapters? Yes, center positive versus center negative. That's super important to get right, or obviously you could blow out your console by, shorting positive to ground. So just any basic multimeter would be able to tell you that. Just stick it into the inside and the outside of the original PSUs to measure. Firebrand X has the shmups thread where he links to ones that he recommends. There used to be one power splitter where you would put any kind of Genesis 1, including the triad barrel on the input side, and it outputted 2 Genesis 1 and 2 Genesis 2, which means any combination of the Tower of Power was always taken care of. And the person who was selling them stopped selling them because the manufacturer wasn't getting consistent quality, and they really wanted to make sure that they sold high quality stuff. And I have been begging resellers to try to find or even remake this cable, because I think that would solve so many problems for so many people. The highest amp triad in one of these cables with all the outputs, and you're done for the entire Genesis setup. Not to mention you don't have to stick 3 freaking wall warts into one splitter just to get it working. Lastly, while I have the consoles open, is there any other maintenance I should do besides cleaning? Nope, I covered the rest in the video. The only thing I would say is just double and triple check for things like, you've already planned on changing the capacitors, but look for any leak damage on the motherboard, clean it that way. Bad Reality chimed in and said, carefully clean the headphone volume switch with contact cleaner. Move the switch up and down after spraying a little bit and clean the cartridge pins. The headphone volume switch would certainly, if yours is making noise when you move it, that might help. I don't really use the headphone anymore now that I got the triple bypass, because the audio is all coming out the back and everything. So yeah, that pretty much sums it all up. Just clean everything as well as you can. Clean the cartridge pins, just like I talked about. But I think you got a pretty solid plan in place. Another one from Bad Reality. Do you have a good recommendation for a Japanese Mega Drive to Sega Genesis card adapter for 16-bit games? Something similar to Nintendo's 60 to 72-pin adapter. I might not be remembering this correctly. I might be wrong, so please excuse me. But I thought that you could use a Game Genie for that. To be honest, I've never tried using anything like that. I have a Mega Drive for Japanese games, and then ROM carts you could use on all regions. But I could very well be wrong, so anybody in the comments might want to chime in if they know I'm suggesting this badly. But I thought for sure that you could just use a Game Genie, and that would take care of it. So please let me know. But if Game Genies are always good to have for a million reasons anyway, so it might be worth trying. TJ says they went down a new rabbit hole they have to get out of. They bought a Fenrir ODE and then realized their Saturn was a VA2, so they have a VA1 on the way. Then they actually forgot about the Terra Onion mode until they were looking for a Dreamcast option, and now they're lost. What's the best solderless ODE option for each console? So, best is always relative, and price always has a lot to do with it for some people. How I explained that when the mode was announced and the Fenrir was announced as well is if you're the type of person that wants to buy like a 32 gig or a 64 gig cheap SD card, load up only the games you want and go, then the Fenrir and that is going to be much cheaper. However, if you're the type of person that wants the full ROM set from all regions to make sure that you have every disc on there, then the mode is actually going to be cheaper because you can get an SSD and that. Mode has other options as well. It supposedly has a really nice thumbnail, gallery view type of thing I've seen pictures of. So I would just choose whichever one fits your setup the best. Price, features, and all of that stuff. For Dreamcast, the knockoff GDMUs, I had one die on me already. I didn't want to buy the knockoff. I always want to support the original creator, but that creator, I don't even want to get into that drama again. It's almost like they don't like money or helping people at the same time. So for me personally, I would just choose the mode for Dreamcast because you should be able to actually buy it soon, and it does look like it's going to have a ton of features and stuff like that. If you're on a budget, you could buy one of the knockoff GDMUs knowing that you're supporting clones, and normally I hate that. I think this is the only time in the history of all of RetroRGB I've ever said, maybe pick up a clone if you need to. Every other time I'm, absolutely hardcore, buying clones is terrible, but there's just so much drama involved in that one. I don't know what else to suggest. And there are new options out there for menu editors and stuff like that might help the GDMU. But for me personally, my choice for Dreamcast would be the mode. My choice for Saturn would be whatever fits your needs best based on the stuff I already said. Joel is having a hard time finding people to mod consoles. They always ask what's possible and pay up front, but sometimes they end up waiting months, and sometimes things can't be done at all, and it's very upsetting. And I completely understand both sides of that, because as a customer, you just want to pay for something and be done. But I've also seen what happens on the other side of things. And I think I'll start with a technical answer to that. And I'll use a perfectly normal example. You have yourself a Turbo Duo, let's just say, and you just want a region-free mod put in and nothing else. Your Turbo Duo works perfect. You've never had a problem with it. You've had it since you were a kid. You send it out to a modder who's expecting to spend 20 minutes doing this job. They have a busy schedule. They open it up and all your caps are leaking and traces are just about to start corroding away. So now they have to do that. And now that's hours worth of work. So they put it aside and say, hey, I can't get to this today. I have other stuff scheduled. Sometimes weeks go by and they eventually do it. And it's frustrating. Or imagine that same scenario and they get all the caps done. They fix the traces. They get everything together and the CD-ROM just stops reading. And it's not anything they did. It's just that CD-ROM drive was on its last breath of life anyway when you sent it out. And that was just it. It just, now you need to replace the lens. Now you need to calibrate it. Sometimes parts aren't even out yet. Sometimes lenses are back ordered, whatever else you got. And now that console ends up sitting at your modder for 6 months before it finally gets turned around and back to you. So that's such a common thing to happen. The other common thing is that once word gets out that somebody does really good work, they get absolutely inundated with work. They can't keep up with it. They get frustrated, burn out, and stop doing it. So that's another thing that constantly happens, and it's another reason why I don't want to ever have recommended modder list again, because it's just going to send a ton of people to somebody, and it's not really fair. It's both sides. Like, I want to give people that do good work business, but I also don't want to overwhelm everybody. So it's rough. I mean, you could try to learn how to do this stuff yourself, but I'm a firm believer that a lot of these things are talent. Like, you could learn how to throw a basketball. You could spend your entire life trying to be the best basketball player on the planet, and you'll never be Jordan. And that's exactly the way I feel about a lot of my modding work. Is I've gotten so much better over the last few years. I do stuff now that I could do stuff now in 10 minutes that when I started RetroRGB would have been a day. But I'll never be Jose, and I'll never be Zach. And I think it's just, some people have it. So no disrespect towards you. I'm not discouraging you to not mod your own consoles. I'm just saying that even if you work your butt off to do a lot of these things, unless you know that you're going to constantly be modding everything that comes into your place, then sure, try doing it yourself. But if you just want to get your collection modded, and every once in a while you'll buy something new that you'll also want modded, I kind of agree with you there. It's better to just send it out to people who have all of the tools, all of the knowledge, have already made all the mistakes. So if something happens, they go to your console, they go, oh, that happened before, no problem, let me fix that up. So it's a rough one. I don't have an excellent answer for that one. I don't even think I have a good answer for that, other than just try to find people through word of mouth, and just try to make sure expectations are set, but also understand that, this is 30, 40-year-old stuff, and you're never going to have a cut and clean guaranteed solution on something. Even on consoles that are generally fine, like Super Nintendos, like who knows what somebody might find when they open one up to do a super easy mod. So I don't know. I guess I don't really have a good answer at all then. So my apologies for that, but it sucks. I understand how frustrating it is for you, and I sure as heck understand how frustrating it is for the modders as well. Alex Shamai wants to know if I have a status update on the original Xbox native HDMI mod. Do you know where I could follow the progress? Yes, RetroRGB.com. Kidding. I'm sorry. I'm being a wise ass. You didn't deserve that. But in all seriousness, as soon as there is a solid answer, yes, there will be a post immediately within a day. You also want to know if you could provide monetary support. That's really generous. I don't think anybody's taking pre-orders now, and I don't think anybody would be comfortable with that until it's ready. So, all teasing aside, I would just check the website, listen to the weekly roundups, and just as soon as something's available at all, I will make sure to put the word out there and let everybody know as best I can. But no word as of now. I just know that it's still in progress. Kelv SYC said that there are some Sega Genesis games that come on J-carts, which are cartridges that come with their own controller ports. I actually have one right here. It is a brand new sealed Pete Sampras tennis, and I believe I bought this because of Genovi. I think he did a video on it, or he talked about it. I'm blaming Genovi for this, but one of these days I want to do a new game unboxing and actually demo exactly what you're talking about. I probably should have done that last week when I needed a video to put out. Now I feel stupid for not have thought of that. Anyway, back to your actual question. Given that the leading ROM cartridges of today do not come in the J-cart form factor, much less have their own controller ports, I'm wondering if there's been an effort to patch the ROMs of those affected games to make them work with standard Genesis multi-tap devices. No, but that is an excellent idea. I still haven't even played Pete Sampras Tennis, even just as a one-player mode, but that's a really good idea, and that's certainly something that I think ROM hackers might be able to do. You might want to try the Crix forum for that. There's a lot of ROM hackers on there that have done some pretty cool things. The SMS Power forums, there's a lot of really brilliant people on that as well, but I don't know of anything personally, but that's a really good question. Cedric Parent wants to know if anybody is hosting firmwares for the USB GD-ROM and 3DO optical drive emulator, because the main website, the 3DO-renovation.ru, is down. I couldn't get to it at all on one browser. On another browser, it said the domain is expired, just like you found. So I don't really know. I guess you could try if they've posted on a forum somewhere. I don't know if I even have an email address. I think I just purchased my 3DO ODE last year, and I think it was like a generic email I got, not somebody's actual email address. Actually, I don't even think I got a confirmation email, to be honest. I think I submitted it, and then it just, and that was it. It just showed up at my house like 2 weeks later, which was pretty fast shipping. So if anybody knows how to get a hold of that person, maybe post in the comments. But hopefully the site's just down and they haven't stopped making stuff, because their 3DO ODU is pretty good. Although it doesn't support 2-disc games, which I really hope that they would add at some point. Isan had an interesting question. So they have a RetroTink 2X that they're going to try to feed into an OSSC for further line doubling. And they, I guess, were originally looking to do that through component video, as that's what Mike Chi recommended. But the audio port 2 on the OSSC is busted, so they can't feed audio into the converter. So they were looking to use an HDMI to VGA converter. That is possible, but the difference is that the VGA input of the open source scan converter doesn't pass through the low pass filter. And anytime you scale an image, you scale everything that goes with it, including all of the noise that's on there. So going through the VGA is not going to look as good as going through component, only for that reason, for the low pass filter. So there is another solution, though. It would get a little complicated, but you could definitely do this. You could use an HDMI to VGA converter, and then on the output, go from a VGA to SCART sync combining circuit. And that's the circuit I just posted last week that Steve from HD Retrovision helped with. I'm talking to a few different people about trying to get something like that made into a cable so that you could just plug it in and go, and that would totally work. And in fact, even if you had a SCART switch, you could probably route that through it as well and be able to have everything all in one, depending on what switch you use, auto detection, power, and all that stuff. That's a whole other conversation, but you could definitely use the SCART input for that. And that obviously also is able to access the low pass filter. You would just need to have a kind of a complicated way to get from VGA to SCART, which hopefully within a few months that will be a lot less complicated. You'll be able to just buy something. So hopefully that'll point you in the right direction. And it looks like you're a new supporter, so thank you very much for joining. I really appreciate that. Well, that's it for this week. As always, thanks so much for everybody that participates, and if you're new to these Q&As, ask any question you have in the latest Q&A post. The way the services work, I can't really filter through what's a new post and what's not, so it's easiest to just do this weekly, and if for whatever reason I don't answer your question, it's almost always because it came in right after I started shooting the video. That's almost happened today, actually. There was a question that came in as I was shooting, but I refreshed the page and it popped up. So if that's the case, please re-ask next week and I will get to it. And sometimes I accidentally delete files in post. It happens. So it's never intentional. Just wanted to let everybody know, wherever the latest Q&A post is, wherever it is you support, that's where you should be posting the questions. And also, I have to leave comments for the YouTube videos just for algorithm reasons. But respectfully, this is something that I like to do just to interact with supporters. While I do respond to probably an unhealthy amount of comments on every other YouTube video, these really are just a thank you and a focus to supporters. So no disrespect if you're posting questions there, but I just don't read the comments on those. So anyway, thank you again for your support. I really appreciate it. I love doing this stuff. I want to keep doing it. So it's really because of you that it's all happening. And hopefully I'll have more interesting and cool stuff coming up in the future. So thanks again, and I'll see you next week.